For decades, researchers have been trying to communicate with Bigfoot. But have you ever wondered who he is trying to communicate with? These audio recordings might just answer that question.
September 13, 2009, just south of Wright, Minnesota. A group of men set out to investigate a series of Bigfoot sightings, and upon hearing the sounds of a bizarre vocalization in the dark, they hit record. Their recordings capture a series of howls thought to be made by an alleged Bigfoot. Listen for the intermittent knocks and whoops that conclude each howl. Now listen as it sounds like wolves or coyotes have joined in the fun. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman wonders if we might be hearing a rare form of conversation.
The research community have noted for decades that there seems to be a connection between coyotes and Sasquatches. A lot of people were saying maybe the coyotes are following the Sasquatches around and waiting for scraps after the Sasquatch kills a deer or something like that. I think it's the opposite.
Barrickman thinks that what we might be hearing is behavior modeled on a more surprising animal, ancient humans.
Human ancestors used to have a foraging strategy called power scavenging. Our ancestors would wait for other animals to take down their prey and then scare away the hyenas or lions just long enough for us to grab some meat and run away with it. Wouldn't that make sense then that the Sasquatches would utilize the same strategies as human ancestors did?
But what about the knocks? Barrickman thinks that could be something like a Sasquatch Morse code.
It has been noted that Sasquatches make something that we now call wood knocks, and quite possibly, they are communicating with one another. There's precedence in the other great apes. A very high-profile study was published about gorillas in Rwanda clapping when researchers enter their area, apparently to warn the other troop members. There's no reason to think that Sasquatches wouldn't do the same thing.
In 2010, a man claimed that a Bigfoot came to him while hunting in North Carolina, attracted by his coyote calls. He says he managed to shoo it away with a stick and something he called rough talking. So maybe Bigfoot does have some long-standing history with coyotes. Let's see what our experts think.
We turn to our resident Bigfoot expert, renowned anatomist and anthropologist, Jeff Meldrum.
One aspect of this recording that I do find intriguing is wood knocks. The problem with these types of recordings is you don't know what is making that sound. It could be the recorder himself, but the initial vocalizations I found much more interesting. All the evidence that we have to date suggests that Sasquatch is omnivorous, that it eats everything from roots and berries up to deer and elk. Therefore, it's possible that there is some sort of communication occurring between Sasquatch and these wolves to take advantage of the hunting skills of one another.
However, wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler wonders if wolves or coyotes aren't responsible for all the howls in this recording.
When I listened to this the first time, I had a hard time distinguishing what sounds people thought were the Bigfoot sounds. To me, it all sounded wolf-like. Towards the end, there's some coyotes. There's actually been studies on people estimating coyote size just based on how loud it is, and they pretty much always overestimate. So just because it's a large vocalization doesn't mean it's necessarily from a large animal.
With that, we go to soundscape ecologist Ben Gottesman for his opinion on how these sounds compare to known wolf vocalizations.
The frequency range matches quite well. The big difference is that wolves usually howl for pretty long periods of time, whereas all of the howls in this recording are quite short.
And that leads Gottesman to an important discovery.
So I found a number of instances here where The clips were just cut midway through. So did you hear that? It completely cuts off and then starts up again. Those might have been wolf and coyote howls, but they were heavily edited to create what sounds like a much weirder creature.
Our verdict? This sound is a hoax. But listen to this. There have been cases of strange, unexplained howls that experts have not ruled out as being Bigfoot calls, like this one. So even though the one we just examined doesn't cut the mustard, we will keep our ears open for signs of Sasquatch. If you're in Michigan, you may already be familiar with this next video captured on a trail camera. 329,000 trail cameras are sold globally each year. So if Bigfoot really exists, you'd think one of those cameras would have documented the creature by now. Well, maybe one did. Watch this.
It's September 15th, 2016. The Platte River State Fish Hatchery in northern Michigan is live streaming a bald eagle's nest. There, 2 baby eaglets are waiting for their mother's return. People keeping a keen eye on their safety from home begin to notice something very strange in the corner of the screen. The video shows some sort of unidentified creature roaming around the base of the nest. It looks like the beast is foraging back and forth beneath the trees. The creature even turns its head up towards the eaglets. We've pushed in so you can get a closer look. It looks like a Sasquatch. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman, director of the National Bigfoot Museum, says this might just be the legendary beast.
Michigan has a long history of Bigfoot reports, and that history continues to the present day. This is good Bigfoot habitat that's well established. It's near a fish hatchery, and fish hatcheries have a lot of fish stacking up underneath it. That's easy prey, not just for those eagles, but for Sasquatches.
The Platte River State Fish Hatchery is located in Beulah, Michigan, with a population around 342. This small town is not the most remote place in Michigan, but it is not far from the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, where the forested terrain could be an ideal habitat for Bigfoot. The state is also rich with shallow rivers, which would serve as an optimal feeding grounds for these creatures. So what might a Bigfoot be doing here?
Could it be that that is a Sasquatch and they wanted to exploit the nest for a food resource? I have personally taken several Sasquatch sighting reports of them in trees or jumping down out of trees. Now, they're certainly up there for a reason, and most likely that's food. Human ancestors exploited eggs and nests for food. Why wouldn't a Sasquatch? I mean, Sasquatches are apes. They're made for climbing.
In fact, in 2020, a researcher in New York's Hudson Valley reported an account of a Bigfoot jumping into a tree and then swinging from tree to tree, grabbing branches with its arms like Tarzan. So Sasquatch sightings in trees aren't uncommon.
More than 3 million people have watched this video trying to figure out what the creature lurking on the ground is and why he is looking up towards the hatchlings. Let's see if our experts can make heads or tails of this.
Wildlife biologist Dr. Stephanie Shuttler explores whether this creature matches the alleged anatomy of the famed Bigfoot, a creature believed to stand between 8 and 10 feet tall.
Based on the way this being moves, it doesn't match up with any primate that I know of. When I think of gorillas, it doesn't look like this. It doesn't seem abnormally large. It just seems like human size. It seems to have regular arms too. Bigfoot arms are supposed to be longer, like gorillas and chimpanzees. I don't think there's anything here to suggest that it is Bigfoot.
A person, perhaps wearing dark clothing, easily mistaken for fur from this angle and great distance, possibly the camouflage of a hunter or a hiker.
Our verdict? The experts agree that this creature is native to these woods, but it's not a wild animal. It's a person out for a hike. The good news is that as far as we know, the baby eagles are alive and well, regardless of what bipedal predators may be in the area. This next bit of footage has earned a special place in the pantheon of Bigfoot sightings. Many professional Bigfoot hunters give it credence. But is it really proof of the legendary creature? You be the judge.
It's June 2001, and Jim Mills, the leader of a youth group called Campus Life, has taken his students on their annual backpacking trip to the Marble Mountains of Northern California. Their hike starts off ideally with picturesque weather, but things quickly take a turn, and that's when they begin rolling this video.
As we wander up into the trees a little bit, there's a brush here.
Off the trail, they first discover what appears to be a makeshift hut constructed from small trees and large branches. They seemingly have been torn down and broken. Then one of the young hikers spots what looks like a creature off in the distance on the hill, high above them.
Oh, my word.
Oh!
That is...
Doesn't look like a person.
It does not look like a
Doesn't
person.
look like...
He paces back and forth while keeping a keen eye on the hikers.
I'm the first one that points to it, and I say, hey, look, it's up there. Bigfoot's coming down right now. And, you know, we knew that that's Sasquatch area. You could tell it was bigger than it looked.
Witnesses who make the case that this is the Marble Mountain Bigfoot point to a couple of features, and let me bring it to the telestrator here. The first thing they point to are these disproportionate arms. One arm, distinctly longer than the next. They also pointed to his size. They said the creature stood between 7 and 8 feet tall. They swear that what they saw on this day was the Marble Mountain Bigfoot.
Field researcher Cliff Barrickman dismisses a lot of the alleged Bigfoot footage he sees, but not this.
The Marble Mountain Wilderness area in Northern California is not very far away from the most famous of all Bigfoot locations, Bluff Creek.
In 1967, a series of giant, controversial footprints were found by a crew building a road into an extremely remote wilderness area in Bluff Creek. The family of a man named Ray Wallace later claimed Wallace made them as a practical joke. But what about that hut? For several years, a research group known as the Olympic Project has been studying a series of nests in Washington state they suspect to have been made by a Sasquatch. The nests are said to resemble structures made by gorillas. Could that be what we're seeing here?
All apes, including humans, make nests. So maybe this is some sort of structure that Sasquatches might make.
He says the figure, though recorded at some distance, has some telltale characteristics.
This figure is walking down the slope with no backpack, one color head to toe, strange body proportions, kind of high shoulders. Height estimates, based on the recreation from the investigators that I personally know, put it between 7 and 8 feet tall. Whatever that is on the hill, it is very large. That could very well be a Sasquatch.
Forensic video analyst Michael Primo explores whether this video has been altered to deceive.
The video has not been heavily compressed to reduce or degrade the video. My personal opinion is that these events did transpire the way that they appear.
Given the authenticity of the footage, biologist Dr. Floyd Hayes takes note of that nesting structure.
This looks like a shelter that was designed by some sort of a creature. The limbs appear to have been torn directly off of the tree, but it definitely appears to have been organized to some extent by intelligent animals.
Then Hayes spots a detail a lot of folks missed.
It looks like we have a string that's dangling there, as well as a red cable of some sort.
A string, which means Bigfoot ties knots, or a person made this shelter, as seems more likely. But what about the creature on the rim? Anatomist Dr. Jeff Meldrum says the figure doesn't look like a hiker, at least not at first.
There didn't appear to be the normal accoutrements that you usually see on someone who's hiking in the backcountry.
Then he focuses on the torso. Bigfoot, he says, are always reported to have thick chests.
Their torsos are very barrel-shaped. These are creatures that are evolved to muscle their way through the environment rather than think their way through.
But not this figure.
You just don't get that impression, nor is there exceptional mass, anything to suggest a really large body.
Meldrum also notes the creature's gait. Look here, you can see it's far from sure-footed.
It seems to be choosing its footing rather gingerly, as if it isn't entirely at home in that environment. It looks like a human walking off-trail.
Meldrum also disagrees with Barrickman's assessment that the figure is 8 feet tall. He says the long distance and the low camera angle make height calculation difficult.
My impression is that it is of human size. It doesn't strike me as a very large, heavy creature. I could say it was a 5.5 foot or a 6.5 foot individual.
So was this all an elaborate hoax?
Given the long distance at which they're observing this creature, I think it's an honest mistake. And this can often happen with people that see humans in the distance and mistake them for a Bigfoot.
Our verdict? We think this is a person wearing a hoodie with extra long sleeves. While our experts agree that isn't Bigfoot in the video, they both concede there are vast portions of the Marble Mountains that remain rarely trekked. So if Bigfoot does exist, it certainly could be living there. No matter your opinions on Bigfoot, the one thing we can all agree on is that he's, well, big. Most reports clock him at 8 to 10 feet tall, so you'd think he'd be easier to find. And in our next story, it's precisely the size of the creature that catches our eye.
It's a clear day in Provo, Utah in February 2019. Local hunters are preparing in the driveway of a home when one of them spots something on the mountains in the distance in stark contrast with the white snow.
I was gonna get more footage of the Sasquatch.
It's hard to spot with the naked eye, but once the hunter zooms in, we can see there's a hulking figure on one of the mountain ridges. It's visible even from this distance.
He's on the mountain, way far back on the mountain. But look how huge he is.
Field researcher Cliff Barrickman provides some much-needed context about the location of this supposed sighting.
There are 7 documented Sasquatch sighting reports from Utah County, which is where Provo, Utah is. There are probably 700 that we've never heard about.
According to Barrickman, this video has a lot of things going for it in terms of the figure's appearance.
If you look very closely, you can actually make out that this is walking on 2 legs. It is one color from head to toe. That shows us it is not wearing clothing. You would be able to see differentiation in color, but this is one color head to toe, which indicates to me that this large bipedal thing is probably fur covered.
But he also says we shouldn't believe the Hollywood version of the cuddly, gentle giant. According to some accounts, these creatures can be killers.
There have been cases of Sasquatches going after humans as a food source. One example was written about by Teddy Roosevelt in his book, The Wilderness Hunter. In this book, Roosevelt talks about meeting a grizzled old woodsman named Bauman, who tells a tale of going into a secluded valley to trap beavers and other animals with 2 partners. Only one man got out. They saw a bipedal figure that stank really bad, leaving big footprints, and they shot at it, which is a bad idea. Don't shoot at a Bigfoot. They don't like it. They'll come for you. And 2 of his partners paid the price.
Wildlife biologist Floyd Hayes compares what we're seeing to the local fauna.
This could potentially be a black bear. It looks a little bit big for a black bear, but they do stand on their hind legs sometimes. They do live in the Provo area, but normally they are hibernating during the winter when there's snow on the ground.
So, given the winter weather, a black bear seems unlikely.
It's possible that this is a moose. They are very large. They're active year-round. The cow or female moose does not have antlers.
While there is a chance that the right angle would create the illusion of standing upright, this occurring with the quadrupedal moose also seems highly unlikely. Next, we turn to anatomist and anthropologist Jeff Meldrum, a former resident of Provo, Utah, who sees a red flag.
That's just a very unlikely place to expect an elusive creature like Sasquatch is described as, to venture out into the open in the broad of daylight. If there was anything attracting its attention, I would suspect it would be more likely to investigate or take advantage of that under the cover of darkness.
But what about the characteristic that caught our attention in the first place? Does size matter?
But look how huge he is.
The slightly higher and the slightly more watered flanks of those foothills are a mixture of sagebrush and mostly scrub oak, which rarely gets much more than about 6-7 feet in height. I think a human-sized subject is the most reasonable conclusion to draw.
Our verdict? We're calling this one a man in a suit. The kicker? According to Professor Meldrum, very shortly after this incident, someone climbed the mountain to look for tracks. And while they didn't find Bigfoot prints, they did find boot prints.